Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves. I'm your host, Ike. And before you get too sucked into this awesome interview, do us both a favor. Like, subscribe, and share this amazing piece of entertainment because I am here with the one, the only, Galan Falakfarsa! Say hello, Galan.
Hey, thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it.
Are you ready to do the Royal Rumble
Yeah,
in the jungle?
whatever that is.
First up, I got a question for you, bud. What's your favorite dad joke?
My favorite dad joke. Well, there are a few ones, but the first one that comes to mind, because it's especially horrible, is why did the frog jump on the girl's head?
I don't know why.
She was a lily.
That.
Yeah, see? Bad.
The best kind of bad, though. What is your favorite underutilized word, my friend?
I'd say my favorite underutilized word's probably preponderance.
Ooh, fun one. Use it in a sentence and give us a full definition.
Well, preponderance, I think a lot of the time contextually is meant to be like an overwhelming amount or like a high saturation of a certain thing. So if you have a preponderance of study questions, then it's possible that you might have too many study questions for the amount of time you have to study.
So hopefully this podcast doesn't take up a preponderance amount of time.
Yeah, it doesn't take up a preponderance of my Sunday's time, I guess.
There we go.
See, it's one of those words that it's easy to define contextually, but you're still, not 100% sure because just people almost never use it. So it's a little bit of mystery and excitement.
So, Galan, what is your biggest everyday temptation?
My biggest everyday temptation is probably ice cream.
Do you have a particular flavor or concoction that really sings the siren's wail in your direction?
I'd say usually something of the mint chocolate chip or coffee variety.
Coffee ice cream is definitely it's hard to pass up because you're not going to get too run down on it, right?
Yeah,
You're like,
fair enough.
I'll have energy. I'm going to get caffeine, right? And then then you 2 hour queue to 2 hours later, me just lying face down on a couch.
Mm-hmm.
What movie will you never skip when channel surfing?
What movie will I never skip when channel surfing? Honestly, there are probably a great many answers to that question. But one that I would probably never skip would be Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring if it was just playing on TV.
Yeah, I love the series, but I cannot concur more. The first one is an all-time banger. It's like just hooks me in every time.
Yeah, all three of them are really good.
Perfect act one.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just I absolutely love any of the scenes that involve the hobbits going about their business in the Shire. And it's just like, oh, that's nice. It's how life could be if I was 3 feet tall and lived in a fantasy world.
3 feet tall, back in the old day, and just smoking just pounds of Kush.
Well, they say I think pipe weed that they smoke in Lord of the Rings is probably like tobacco. I think
it's not.
Are you sure?
Yes, it is. It is very much not. There's at one point Saruman says, I believe in referring to the stuff Gandalf is smoking has clouded your mind. Oh. Tobacco doesn't cloud your mind. There's a lot of subtle hints about like the type of folk and stuff like that they are, that it is very much of the ganja variety.
Fair enough. So I guess, yeah, that makes sense if hobbits are stoners. I guess that was one of the things I was never sure about. I just assumed that it was based on the era and the author that they were talking about tobacco, but
Tolkien kept it very nebulous, and I think somewhat intentionally, but the way I guess I choose to read it and a lot of others have is that it is that sticky icky.
Well, that's...
Growing up, you might have accidentally answered the upcoming question with your past question, with the past answer. Growing up, what was your favorite book?
Yeah, actually, it is not answered by one of my previous answers. My favorite book growing up, I gotta say, it was just because of the period of time that the movie came out. I mean, the book came out, and it was very exciting for me. Was the fifth Harry Potter book? Just because, like, I don't like in terms of my entire childhood or just like growing up, there was probably not a single point where I was quite as excited as when I was waiting for the midnight release of the fifth Harry Potter book. I think I was like, I don't know, like 12 or 13. So it was.
Yeah, the fifth one definitely was had a lot of expectations on it after the kind of huge like punch to the gut that was the fourth one.
You didn't like the fourth one?
No, I love the fourth one, but it's
heavy.
I think the first three, it literally and figuratively is quite heavy. But the first three were really nice, kind of, it was all the bad things that happened in the past. In the first three, like, what's the worst thing that happens, right? Like, you get some information that gets revealed about, the past, but nothing like big bad happens. It's all bad guys getting hurt, good guys, doing the right thing and all that. And then in the fourth one, an innocent, not even just a good guy, but a completely, a Hufflepuff boy who's just trying to represent his school dies. And it's just like, just laid to waste because bad guys are bad guys and do bad things.
Yeah.
It definitely was a huge
yeah,
turn.
It was, I mean, comparing, I remember in theaters when that happened, like everybody was pretty shocked. I mean, I know at this point, like obviously the movie's been out for forever, but like it was pretty crazy after seeing like the first three movies. Like the worst thing that happened in the first three movies is they played the sound effect of like the hippogriff getting beheaded. I think that was probably like the most like gruesome thing that happened, but they didn't actually show anything. It was just listen.
Yeah, it was presumed too, right? Because it's not actually the hippogriff getting beheaded; it's the executioner throwing his axe because he doesn't get to behead a hippogriff.
That's true.
Like a psychopath.
Yeah. Did
you read the books before seeing the movies, or did you see the movies and then go back and read the books, or how did that kind of? How did those interactions
I actually didn't read the first three books for a few years. My mom used to, I'm sure you've had this too, but my mom would read to me and my sister at night, and it was usually something of the fantasy or, just generally fiction variety. So, yeah, Harry Potter was something that my mom was reading to me for a while. My dad would read it sometimes, but it's mostly my mom. Yeah, it was cool. Fun. I mean, good memories and whatnot, but it definitely felt like it was pretty cool, like the passing of the mantle, and it was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to read from here on out. Thanks for reading the first few, but I'm going to read the rest.
Okay, but you never saw one of them before having read or been read the book.
Every single movie in the Harry Potter franchise, I had read the book prior to. I mean, not counting Fantastic Beasts, but of the first 8 movies.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, I had a similar experience when growing up. I read, I think it was the first 3, maybe 4. I think it was first 3 I just read by myself, and I was just like, I just inhaled them. I remember just being like, they like do my homework and immediately go to the book, do my homework, immediately go to the book every day. Like, just like could not churn through them fast enough. Luckily, I hadn't been exposed to them until I think all the first 3 were out. And then there was this big lull, and my dad at that point had gotten into them. And then at that point on, it became kind of like a family activity. We would sit around and he would read and do voices, and we all get just to enjoy them every night together.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Cool. So it sounds pretty similar to what you got to do with them, or like in reverse.
I get what you mean.
Super rad. If you had to evacuate your house, what's the first non-living thing you'd grab? We're assuming all people and animals can get themselves out. Hell, even fish can escape. They can wriggle free.
That's a good question.
What do you got in snatch?
I would say probably my magic collection.
Is it all tightly bundled from last I sorted it, or has it begun to sprawl out?
It's incredibly sprawled out. I would probably have to be making a couple trips jogging through the flames to get the second half of the collection.
I got to tell that story to a friend the other day of how I somewhere between tricked you and cajoled you into letting me sort your collection for $40
That was a good deal.
or whatever it was. Yeah, everybody was appreciated all around. It was
10 out of 10 would do again.
Yeah. For those of you that were not there, which is everybody, I went and stayed at Galan's flat when he was finishing up his like third or fourth year at San Jose State, University, right? San Jose State. And he had let his magic collection migrate to many a surface across his very small room. And while staying there, I am someone that loves to create order in chaos, as Sean Ken said an episode or so ago. And I found myself wanting to sort his collection, but also wanting a little bit of value for my time, as it were. So I hatched a lascivious plan and
paying him to organize my collection, and I knew it was only going to last like a matter of days or weeks, but he still got me.
Yeah, that too. But the best part was I asked, we kind of bartered, or we haggled back and forth on, how much, and we came to a price that we were both accepting of. And as you started to see me do it, you just kind of looked over in between like a game of League of Legends or something, and you just saw how much I was just kind of going at it. And you said, "You'd have done this for free, wouldn't you?" And I said, "Absolutely."
Yeah, I remember. You were definitely having fun doing that. It's not a mistake I would make again. Next time I see you,
you're just going to lead me into the room that has them all lying about and just leave, knowing what the result will be.
Bring a couple bags of chips and some good sub sandwiches, and I'll just sit there, just watch a movie while supervising your card sorting.
What's your favorite industry secret or term that's only used in your line of work?
Well, it goes in the realm of behavior analytic jargon. There's a term called mand. A mand is so it was coined by B.F. Skinner when he was basically creating the foundation for the different principles and phenomena and applied behavior analysis. But mand is a very fancy term for a request, which is essentially fulfilled through another organism's behavior. And it doesn't always have to be like vocal or anything, but a mand is essentially just an organism asking another organism to do something for them. So that can include a child screaming at the top of their lungs, which they may have received a cookie in the past for screaming at the top of their lungs. So it could be a mand in that context. So that's using it in the sentence, but in a nutshell, it's just a really good universal term for when somebody's asking something else for something.
So is that in any way related to the word demand?
Yeah. It's I think that when he was writing about it, he wanted to distinguish it from request because request kind of implies like, I don't know. So a lot of the time a request would have to be vocal. So I think he wanted to encompass non-vocal forms of communication like gestures, crying, whatever. But I think he mentioned that it was sourced from the word command.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so you're essentially issuing a command of another organism to, give you.
But it specifically requires it to not be in intentional parlance. So it can't be somebody physically. It can't be, I would like you to stop doing that. It would have to be like somebody punching you or like giving you a frowny face or like something particularly non-verbal, right? Or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, just a little bit. So all I'm saying is that all of those are encompassed by mands. I'm saying that even the more rudimentary, like less effective forms of communication can still count as a mand. So like it would be an extremely appropriate mand to say, "Can you please go get me a glass of water?" Something like that. Okay. That's a very socially appropriate mand. So, but what I'm saying, I guess, is that mands aren't always socially appropriate. Like in the case where there's a little kid screaming for something, which may be a cookie. Yeah.
That's really cool that it's this all-encompassing, So would it be, well, if using it in a sentence, would it be the child manded a cookie? All right, sweet.
Yeah, the child mandate for
a psychologist.
Yeah. Yeah, behavior analysis a little bit different than psych, but yeah, along fairly similar terms.
Scoreboard.
Yeah, but I've always thought that B.F. Skinner has a lot of interesting terms, and some of them are very counterintuitive and don't make a lot of sense unless you've been exposed to them, but they are very functional for describing behavior. So
that's awesome. What piece of advice have you gotten over the years that you believe has made the biggest difference to you?
This might be a cliche, but as somebody who has historically been prone to constant and unyielding anxiety, I would say just the general notion that most things aren't as important as they seem. Like,
Ooh.
That's not to be like cynical or like nihilistic or anything. It's not like, nothing matters. It's more just like you can, in terms of like what you want to worry about and what you want to, actually invest energy in. It's like you can definitely pick your battles. You don't have to choose to be afraid of every outcome, because for the most part, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of most things just don't matter.
Yeah, that definitely is one of those ones that took me a time to learn. And it's also one of those ones that's good to be reminded of, right?
Yes.
Because you sometimes get lost in the mix and you don't forget that, but you don't realize that it applies to your circumstance.
Yeah, it can happen. For me contextually, like that has most come up when it's like something that's going to inconvenience me, but something that I can definitely deal with. It's not like an unsolvable problem. It's just like additional work. Like having to do slightly more work should not cause me groundbreaking amounts of anxiety.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, similar idea with like in terms of competition, like, basically getting your ego bruised by like not performing as well as you'd like to, or you think that factors outside your control contributed to, your loss, or, from the standpoint of like a sportsman or a gamer, that's one that I pretty much just had to realize. It's like, hey, not every loss has to be like a frustrating ordeal where you have to process it emotionally. It's like sometimes you just drop it. It's like it's a match. It's over. Like unless there's a draw, somebody's always going to win, the other person's always going to lose. So sometimes I'm going to be the one losing, and that's okay.
Yeah. Or not getting the promotion at work, having a girl that you thought liked you not want to go on a second date. It's like, oh no, this like big thing. It's like, take a step back and think about it. Like, you're going to have other opportunities. This isn't going to be the last promotion at work. This isn't going to be the last person you ever meet that you get along. You just met this person. There might have been way more behind door number 2 that was like a lot scarier. There might be somebody that you meet tomorrow that's, way cooler. And that, the world is a big place, right? It's like not there's so many opportunities. And it is very unlikely that most circumstances that you'll be in will be the last one of its kind. There's no reason to freak out one way or the other.
Yeah, I think on average, like the inconveniences and day-to-day frustrations that people encounter and react to are not worth it, in my opinion. I think that a lot of people make basically invest a lot of energy in things that are absolutely like frivolous and completely arbitrary.
Totally. Do you have a favorite anecdote that you like to tell?
Yes, but it is magic related.
Hit me.
All right. So essentially, I was playing a legacy tournament, and I was playing my winning in for the top 8 portion of the tournament. And in a nutshell, game 1, I didn't do I ended up getting pretty unlucky, and I made a couple mistakes, and I got completely smashed in the first game of our match. So it was pretty demoralizing going into the second game. But long story short, my opponent played a land card, which is those are your resources in Magic, and you can only play one per turn. So they played a land, which is a unique one that is also a creature. So basically, there's a spell in my deck that allows me to put a creature with certain characteristics on top of its owner's deck. So in a nutshell, my opponent kept replaying the same card over and over for the rest of the game, and I just kept putting it on top of his deck, and he never got to really do much of anything. And the cherry on top was that the same situation, about 80% similar, happened in game 3. So
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, after getting completely smoked in the first game of a best 2 out of 3, I didn't let my opponent play the game at all for the other 2 games. So
how very nice of you.
Yes. But I mean, when the objective is to win, it feels pretty good when your opponent doesn't get to do anything.
It absolutely does.
Yes.
Magic, and like most other games, is a game of
sadism.
Well, it's kind of interesting. After playing Magic and playing poker for, probably coming on close to about half my life at this point, it's interesting to know how frequently in both games and plenty of other games, the objective in playing the game is that your opponent doesn't.
Yeah.
Or not in the way that they had initially anticipated.
Yeah, because I mean, some people, I guess it's maybe they're not being 100% genuine when they say, like, as long as I have an interactive game, like, it's fine. Like, obviously I want to win, like, winning is my preference, but I genuinely feel like if there's a game where I get, like, the game goes back and forth for a long time, I get to make a lot of decisions, and I feel like my decisions impacted the trajectory of the game, it is far less frustrating for me to end up losing a game like that. Like, I don't mind if it's like a really long back and forth that I end up losing by like an inch. Like, obviously it's frustrating, but nowhere near as bad as just like, sitting there with a handful of cards with nothing on the table while you're just getting completely smoked by your opponent while not being able to make any meaningful decisions. So, could
absolutely
always be worse.
No, I totally agree. I think that's also one of those things that, like, is relatively true across the board. I think most people would like to do something. It's kind of like, even if they're not helping, people would rather do busy work than no work in a situation fraught with anxiety and, dour expectations on the result, right?
Yeah,
I mean, nobody wants to sit around and wait for the inevitable to happen. They would like to try and do something, even if it is, like, unlikely to, better their circumstance.
Yeah, it's just having like a sense of agency, like your decisions matter, like the cards you're playing with have an impact. You don't just feel like, an inert like plastic bag just flying around, like just
out here flying around like a plastic bag, Mom. Don't worry about me.
We need to roll that Katy Perry song.
What do you regret not having done or tried before you graduated high school?
It's a good question. I would say just not any one particular experience, but more so just the general notion of immersing myself in more diverse social situations. Like, basically I spent the vast majority of my time like in high school and middle school, I was a swimmer in middle school and high school, so that took up a lot of my non-school related free time or recreation, whatever you want to call it. So the majority of my remaining time was consumed by video games and like playing Magic particularly. Which I have no regrets, that it was very fun, and I made a lot of amazing lifelong friends throughout Magic. Obviously I'm not talking about you, but and anybody else. I'm just kidding. Love you, buddy. But yeah, essentially, I just wish that maybe I would have invested more effort in socializing myself at a younger age. Not to say that I would have really enjoyed partying or would have reaped any kind of benefit from it, but I do think that my learning, social, figuring out basically how to how do I say this?
Yeah. You wish you dipped your toes in more social pools.
Yeah, I just wish that I had, given myself more exposure to those types of circumstances, so that, when now I feel like, quote unquote adult. Obviously I've been, a legal adult for 9 years, but it's only the last couple of years that I feel that sense of independence and maturity where I feel like, okay, I'm an adult, I'm going to, adult social events, and I feel fine. Like, I'm very cordial with everybody, but there are some times where I'm not really sure how to conduct myself as far as like, should I involve myself?
There's not a match slip. I don't have an opponent. What am I doing here? What's going on?
Yeah, there's sometimes it's kind of just like, oh, well, I want to be, I guess, on my own, but I don't want to be coming off as asocial.
So you said you swam growing up. Did you ever swim against our mutual friend Andrew Murch?
So I went to some of the same meets as him, but admittedly, I was never in the same like time brackets as him. He was like, in terms of achievement in swimming, he went a lot further than I did. Like, I did it mostly as a form of exercise, and I enjoyed the competition, but I was definitely never one of the fastest guys. Whereas Murch was definitely a hot shot in high school. Like, he
tried out for the Olympics.
Yep.
Right. He went to trials.
Olympic trials. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was a very accomplished swimmer. But point is yeah, I was very much aware of his presence. Like, I had seen him at meets, but I was never one of the guys who was fast enough to be racing in his bracket, basically.
Yeah. So you met him there. Did you talk to him then, or did you only get to like know him through playing Magic?
No, I never interacted with him prior to playing Magic. Like, I think that like, the first time I interacted with him was we were like the mutual group of friends, like Ricky, Hetrick, and a few other people. I don't remember, but it was after a Magic tournament, and it was one of those situations where you go to a restaurant with 7 or 8 people, and you don't know half of them, but yeah, it was cool.
Were you startled to see him there? Like, wait, what's going on? Like, I saw you swimming, and now I'm seeing you here.
I had some idea that he played Magic. It was just kind of like, seeing him in person. Like, I think that it was like my senior year that when I actually like interacted with him, like in terms of Magic, and I had seen him at a swim meet like 2 years prior. So it wasn't like, an ongoing thing where I saw him all the time. Yeah. But yeah, at that point I was like, oh, hey, that's funny. There's this guy who used to go to the same swim meets as me. I know he was fast, but that's cool that he also plays Magic. And that was pretty much the extent of my thoughts on the subject. I didn't really know him, but he's a very cool dude.
Yeah. No, totally awesome. Earlier guest on this podcast, shout out to Murchie. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite little known factoid?
Well, this one is only my favorite because it's very strange, and I think most people are in disbelief when they hear it. But apparently the longest sperm of any animal in the animal kingdom there's a species of fruit fly, and the individual sperm, it can be up to 5 centimeters long. So it is, just to put that, just to put that into perspective, that's about 20 times the length of the actual fly. So that would be like if our sperm was like 100 plus feet long.
That's wild. What the hell?
Yeah, it's very bizarre. It's like you would think like, okay, why would a tiny random fly? And it's not like, not to get gross, but it's not the, it's not even like the media that sperm is delivered in. It's literally just the sperm itself is a 5 centimeter long object, which is hilarious because
also that's like pretty long, not even including sperm. 5 centimeters is like, that's like nearly 2 inches.
Yeah, the fact that you can see it with a naked eye is like absurd.
That's crazy. Yeah. Is it fair to assume that the fly dies upon delivering said sperm?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you that part. I mean,
if it lives after that, that is like the second most insane factoid I would have ever heard. Like, full stop. That's so crazy.
But define lives after that, because I mean, who knows? Like, maybe living after that means that they live out the ripe old age of 12 hours after mating.
The ripe old hours of 12 hours. Well, speaking of 12 hours, fill in the blank for me on this one. This weekend was so great. I spent 13 hours
playing video games.
Any video game in particular that you would like absolutely adore spending 13 hours just shoveling time into?
I mean, most of the time when I play not Magic, sorry, when I play video games, it's not necessarily like all enjoyment. There is some masochism that goes into it, like, you know, but League of Legends, you know, well known as one of the most toxic gaming communities in the multiverse. I'd say I've been playing League of Legends the most recently, but if just for the sake of conversation, the last console game that I spent a lot of time on, it was a couple months ago, but it was very, very good, was Little Nightmares 2. Yes, it's a puzzle platformer that is very dark and macabre and has kind of like Tim Burton-esque type aesthetic vibes. The universe that it's in is pretty cool. There's like a time loop that is involved in the storyline. It has a lot of Easter eggs. Like, the story is pretty interesting. It's very, very weird, but super cool. Anybody who likes a puzzle platformer that's kind of, I mean, it's M-rated. It's kind of disturbing, but it's a very, very, very good game. But Sweet. Play the first one first.
As all things should be done in life. First one is first.
Except for the few limited circumstances where the first part of a trilogy is nothing to be missed. Or, you know, something like that.
What's your favorite, I am normal moment that you've had over the course of your life?
Well, I guess if we're talking about something that is the most like pertinent to now, probably just like,
it doesn't have to be pertinent. Just what's the one that it kind of stands out because it was funny or made the biggest impact?
Well, I mean, one easy one is like COVID. Basically, like when COVID first started, like I know there were a lot of people who were kind of shaken by the notion that they would have to be, you know, on lockdown or whatever, and people were kind of concerned or, you know, apprehensive about it. But for me, I was probably one of the people who was really excited to have that. Not, I mean, you know, not to forsake my duties or, you know, not have as much responsibility, but just it was kind of an interesting change of pace that was fairly compatible with my personality. Like, I'm pretty introverted, so I don't really mind not having in-person interactions with people on a frequent basis. But the thing that resonated with me was I saw a lot of people, you know, a lot of memes and stuff and friends on social media essentially talking about like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not the only person who's actually kind of down with not I wasn't the only person who was okay with not going into, you know, social situations for a long period of time.
That's kind of interesting because I was very much on the flip side of that in a sort of way. I didn't, before COVID, if you asked me if I was introverted or extroverted, I would have presumed that I was introverted, given my hobbies, given like just kind of the way I lived my life up until that point. But when that happened and I was like living alone for a while and then like finally had a roommate, I realized how extroverted I might be. An introverted extrovert, but I definitely am an extrovert. And that one, it was kind of interesting. Like you said, we were in a very similar friend group. And so it was, you know, saw people posting memes and making comments about how, you know, nothing's changed for them or, you know, finally now I'm not being judged for not going outside or, you know, whatever. And for me, I'm just over here, like in the fetal position, rocking back and forth. It's like, I need somebody else for comfort. And it was just like kind of freaking out. It was very interesting. And also like to add to the kind of like inward self-loathing I felt for a little bit and the kind of otherism I was kind of dealing with is like my brother and my father are both true introverts and we're digging it. My dad literally said, "I'm sorry people are dying, but this is great. I don't have to interact with anybody." And he was just head over heels, just happy as a clam, just not having to deal with nearly as many people as he did previously and just getting to enjoy his life and deal with so much less, you know, just talking to people, having to deal with people, and just getting to do what he needed to do, and then, go home and watch Jeopardy. And so for him, it was like such a great thing. And my brother's very, introverted. He's like, I get to stay at home, play video games, and do my work, and I don't have to drive anywhere. This is great. And just stayed at home with his cats and had a ball. And I'm just, finally, I learned more about myself, but it was through a very interesting experience, and thusly actually created this podcast as a kind of like reflex to not getting to see and talk to as many people.
Well, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yep. For those of you that didn't know that little nugget, there you go. Fun extra factoid of the day. Is there a moment that you look back, like in your life, is there a moment that you look back on your life with the most pride and joy?
I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily pride from the standpoint of like having accomplished something that like impacts my life in like any huge capacity, but I would say that our team event top fouring that Grand Prix together, that was there's a Magic tournament that had a couple of thousand competitors, and we ended up getting into the top 4 in the second day of competition. So that was fun. Yeah, that was definitely thrilling. Yeah. It was probably one of the most exciting things that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride and joy swirling around that 3 of us that day. It was tremendous. It was a really fun one. Takes me back.
I miss events like that.
Yeah, those were awesome. Well, lastly, before we throw it to a commercial break, if you could have the listeners of this podcast hear one song of your choosing, which would it be?
Well, I mean, it would has the requirement that you like alternative rock, but the song Stockholm Syndrome by Muse is one of the first songs I ever heard by Muse, and just for context, Muse is now probably one of might be my favorite band of all time, but definitely one of the top 3. But I think Stockholm Syndrome is a song that a lot of people who I have talked to Muse about Muse, they said that they hadn't heard it, or it was like that song on the album that they never really paid much attention to because it wasn't one of the ones that had like a ton of hits or views. But I think that song is really, really good, even though it didn't necessarily get the same amount of attention as other songs on that album.
Totally. Yeah, it's to be completely honest, you had to remind me of it, and I absolutely agree. Upon having a second listen in recent memory, it is a true banger.
Yes, the guitar riffs and the drums are pretty great. It's a very epic song,
as Muse is known for.
Yep. Pretty angsty, but pretty epic.
And with that, we're going to throw it to our first break. Feel free to stick around and enjoy the Totally Real commercial, or take a minute to enjoy Stockholm Syndrome by Muse. Or, if you really want to hear a song from a previous episode, check out the playlist on Spotify, Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves podcast, Songs Rex. There's a link in the description if you don't want to try to write all that out. Either way, see you in a jiffy. Having trouble staying awake?
Oh, yeah.
Wish you'd followed your dream so you had the give a crap necessary to meet your deadlines?
Oh, definitely.
Are you likely to be fired the second another warm body walks through that door and asks your boss for an application?
Probably.
Would you prefer to keep this shit sack of a job instead of explaining to Susan that you've been fired?
I mean, I guess.
Well then, let me introduce you to caffeine. Caffeine is a highly addictive substance that'll keep you jittery and energized to do any fucking stupid task for hours.
That sounds like drugs.
It is!
Aren't drugs illegal?
Not this one. So next time you feel like sitting on the sidewalk instead of at your desk, reach for a caffeine.
Wait, you didn't tell me where I can buy it.
'Cause it's mother-loving everywhere, you blind Neanderthal. And we are back. Galan, what is your passion?
Well, I have a lot of hobbies in terms of games and like encompassing like card games like Magic or video games, but one common denominator between all of those things is that they all have a pretty interesting universe with, their own characters, their own mythology, I guess, so to speak. I mean, that's especially true with like For those who don't know, like Lord of the Rings is easily one of my favorite franchise. Not just the movies, but just in general. I think that the Tolkien Legendarium, as they call it, is one of the coolest creations of any human being. So I think it's really, really cool to like, I enjoy going through like wikis and looking up pieces of information that are, you know, like quoted from the Silmarillion, which is essentially the super dry but very interesting history textbook that Tolkien created for
the hyper appendix.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just like a giant. I mean, there are some narratives within it and some like stories, I guess you could say, with limited dialogue. But for the most part, the Silmarillion definitely reads like a mythology textbook for the world of Arda, or where the continent of Middle Earth is.
Yeah. When did you start getting into that? Like, when did you realize that you had such a fascination with like the mythology and the kind of mythos of, certain stories, religions, or, fiction?
Yeah. Just to clarify. So for me, I am interested in some of the, I like the mythology of some of the polytheistic cultures, Greek, Roman mythology, some Middle Eastern mythology, Asian mythology. Like, I think that stuff is pretty interesting. There's some cool stuff in like Christian mythology, but I haven't really delved too deep into that. It's mostly like I guess you could say, less controversial mythologies that, people probably wouldn't lose sleep talking about. But yeah, I would say that it was really my involvement with games that originally turned me on to that. So I remember, for example, when I first started playing World of Warcraft, I thought it was super cool to learn more of the backstory about the World of Warcraft universe, which, I mean, with the with the recent the recent controversies and ethical dubiousness that Blizzard has engaged in, I'm glad that I haven't supported their games for many years now, but yeah, I mean, that's one example. I think that another is I started playing League of Legends about 10 years ago, but I've always thought it was pretty cool to learn more about the backstory of the actual universe. And I really enjoyed, for example, Arcane. It was if anybody hasn't seen it, it's a Netflix show based in the League of Legends universe that kind of expands on the lore and gives a little bit more depth to the world. So that was pretty cool. And then another one, going back to Magic, I always thought it was cool that, you play this card games. There are characters that are they're designated as legendary. They have a name, they have a title a lot of the time. So looking at this character and be like, okay, so who's this dude? He's just some ambiguous dude, but
some bro.
Yeah, but then you learn about I really enjoy the Magic multiverse. I think just the premise of planes and different planes of existence is pretty cool. But yeah, it's mostly just that involvement with those franchises that sparks, sort of a secondary curiosity of okay, these characters are cool. I really enjoy this game, etc. But I want to see more of the world that they are, were designed to inhabit, and how they connect to every other characters, events, locations within the game, timeline, stuff like that. So basically, I guess I would say that just finding how everything fits together is very satisfying for me. Same is true of the Marvel universe. Almost every single Marvel movie that I've ever watched, both beforehand and afterward, I'll just have a bunch of questions in my head about okay, so what's this setting up for based on the sequence of events, and I'll kind of read more about the backstory of certain characters that maybe I hadn't had much prior exposure to. So yeah, along those lines.
That's awesome. Did this first start with you with Tolkien or WoW? Where did this excitement, do you think first started to take hold, and where you started researching and looking stuff up? Was it Magic? Because it's I know they have the novels. Did you just get one of those and start reading, or where was the the impetus moment?
Yeah, I mean, there are probably a couple. Actually, Tolkien was something that I was a little bit late to the party on. I mean, I've always liked the Lord of the Rings movies and whatnot, but I never really like got deep into the lore and like absolutely loved it until maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. But I'd say yeah, the first was like there's a magic set called Odyssey from like the early 2000s, and basically there was a book that it was one of the novels from the set release, and I thought it was pretty cool, so I picked it up and I read it, and I was like, oh wow, so these characters that I see in cards, like they do have a backstory and everything, and
that was like it was Kamal.
Yeah,
and
I was just gonna say I was
Jessica.
Yep.
The good old days.
Yeah. Back before.
What would you? This is kind of a different one for your kind of passion, but is there like a misconception about mythologies by the wider world, do you think? That like you would like, that kind of like irks you, or you would prefer to like have cleared up?
No, not especially.
All right, strike that one. So you said you enjoy and have kind of not researched, but explored the Greek mythologies a fair amount. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you check out the game Hades?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've read a bit about it, but I've never actually really gotten into it. But I'm under the impression that it is an extremely good game that I have been sleeping on. So.
I can confirm. I was just curious to see what your thoughts on the lore and the way they kind of personified it, because they do take some leniency for content on like the one, they're speaking English, two, just like the way the characters are and like certain things they talk about probably not canon, as you will, but it definitely seemed to kind of fit the vibe from what I remember about the little I read about Greek mythology.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Definitely some homework for you to check out.
Yeah,
Is there a non-obvious aspect when it comes to mythology that you would like to explain?
Non-obvious aspect.
Like most things most people just don't realize about mythology, whether it's are they intended to be real, or is it, more like a bedtime story? Whether it's the way certain ones interacted with cultures or with certain games, whether, the kind of like, because for instance, like in the Marvel universe, there are multiple different timelines. You have comics that contradict each other because they exist in effectively different universes, correct?
Yes.
So how does that sit with you as a viewer, and is it kind of explained? Do you look at it as like there's different worlds, or how does that kind of rest with you as a viewer?
I understand that it's one of the logistics of like, having narrative freedom. Like it would be pretty lame if essentially the alternative would be that either one author writes literally everything and is conceptually consistent, all across time or whatever, or it would just be like a series of different writers who basically just pick up the mantle and continue the same type of tradition. I think that it's like more or less inevitable that you end up with like different things that are canon and different timelines, or like basically different comics. So I think that people need to understand that like I know, like talking to my own family or like friends, like some people do have trouble understanding stuff like, oh, but I thought you mentioned that Scarlet Witch was, in X-Men, like, she, or, from the X-Men comics, and that her father is Magneto. Then I don't understand, why does the Wanda and the, Marvel movie, I'm just like, you have to understand that it's functionally a different character with its own origin story and its own canon. So like, that's just kind of how it works. And unless you want to create a tradition of each writer essentially having a monopoly on the creative licenses for a certain character or a certain storyline, then you have to just accept that sometimes you're going to have stories that don't line up because at the end of the day, each of them is more or less, the work of a craft, and not everybody is going to write it the exact same way. So
how do you, as a viewer, kind of navigate which timeline which comic is taking place in? Because there's a lot of crossover between comics, right? You'll have like Deadpool and a Spider-Man comic, but it's not going to be necessarily the same Deadpool or the same Spider-Man that was in previous or different iterations created by different writers and authors and illustrators. How do you determine, does it say, this universe has a stamp on it, or like how do you kind of navigate that where you're not getting confused as the reader though?
Usually I do have to invest some time and effort doing background research and trying to like sort of cobble together like which parts, which literature, which media like are conceptually consistent with each other, and which ones are considered like canon, like in the context of them, being in the same universe.
Is that just like a bunch of like, Google and Wikipedia deep diving, or is there an easier or more succinct way of doing that?
Yeah, it's mostly just wikis and stuff. At least I don't know if that's the, objective best way to do it, but that's how I do it.
So effectively you get to indulge in your passion while indulging in your passion.
Yep.
Sounds pretty neato. All right, from the passionate to the preposterously obnoxious. Galan, what is your preposterous peeve?
It's a good one. I had a few potential ones, but I think that the one that stood out to me is that if I'm showing somebody, particularly a friend or a family member, a movie or a TV series for the first time, and especially if they've entered into some unofficial vocal contract where they said that they're interested in watching it, I take that to mean
they've reacted to your man.
Yes, exactly. So at that point, I kind of have the unrealistic expectation that they are going to dedicate as much effort and focus to watching it as I am, and it irritates the shit out of me when people even like will periodically like say somebody says, "Hey, I want to watch Avengers Infinity War. I've never seen that movie." And then we start watching it, and like 2 minutes in, they're checking their phone even if it's for a few seconds. Like, come on, there's so much to unpack in these. Like, basically what's going through my head, which, might sound ridiculous to some people, is like, there's so much to unpack in these movies that like you can literally watch it 10 times over and still find something new every watch because of all the Easter eggs and all the crossover. But then you have somebody who's seeing it for the first time and they're like, wait, what's going on? Who's Thanos again? What's going on here? And then, you watch like the sequel, Avengers Endgame, with that same person, and then they're like, wait, what about Vision? Where's Vision in this movie? It's like, oh, really? You don't remember what happened to Vision?
Would you rather they be on their phone not paying attention and not ask questions, or would you rather they be paying attention, not get it, and ask questions?
I would infinitely rather that they pay attention, not get it, and ask questions. Because then, I mean, I'm not going to judge somebody based on having difficulty with grasping the subject matter. I think, it's a lot of it is very voluminous. There's a lot going on in whatever we're watching, whether it's like something Tolkien or Marvel, whatever. But point is, if they're actually making a concerted effort and they're asking questions, then to me, that's they're putting in the effort and they actually give a shit. So I have no problem with that. It's just when they're like basically not paying attention and just like, oh, cool, I'm just sitting through this because
they're just shining you on.
Yeah, it's like I'm sitting through this because it's the better way to shut you up than to have you ask me every other week if you want to watch the movie.
When did you first notice it? Or if you can't remember that, when is the most recent time that you noticed somebody doing that kind of drove you up the wall?
It's hard to say when it started. It's kind of been an always sort of thing, but maybe it's like sort of this unrealistic expectation I have that I've invested a certain amount of time and effort into learning about this universe, and I want to share it with somebody. And when they are just kind of like,
how dare they not accept your nerdy love?
Yeah, they're like, how I couldn't fucking care less,
Is there a time that it happened recently where you had to just like take a deep breath or walk out of the room?
Yeah, I was probably watching something with my wife, and she probably checked social media, and I was just like, why aren't you watching the movie?
Do you have a kind of going back to your passion before we move on to the last segment? Is there a Easter egg that you found or found the most joy in finding in recent history?
Are you talking about like within any universe or like
Yeah, any universe at all.
Well, I think the low-hanging fruit is probably Marvel. I I don't know. I wouldn't say that there's anything like a specific Easter egg that stands out to me, but in general, like there are several movies, like a lot of the crossovers, like the Avengers movies, like, you know, and any of the four, like just rewatching them and like trying to pause it on certain scenes where it's like a lot of the time, like there's so much clutter going on in the scenes where they do have the Easter eggs. It's, you know, a natural misdirection, sleight of hand type stuff where it's like, unless you're actually looking for the thing in the background in the corner, there's no way in hell you're actually going to pay attention, because in the foreground, you know, the protagonist is having an epic battle with the villain or something, and you're going to be paying attention to that.
True.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, we're going to head to our second ad break, but don't go anywhere, because when we get back, Galan is going to enter the
lightning round.
See you in a bit. Have you ever just looked at fried carbs on a plate and thought, I need to eat those, but it doesn't taste all that appetizing? Introducing catsup. Catsup is a sugary and red syrupy paste that'll overshadow any unappreciated taste. Simply douse the unpreferred tasting object and ingest. Mmm.
Thanks, catsup.
And we are back. Galan, are you ready to enter the lightning round?
Lightning round?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. Put however much time it takes to bake this cookie on the clock. Galan, is there a god?
No.
Shakira's voice in Danny DeVito's body, or Danny DeVito's voice in Shakira's body?
Shakira's body, I guess.
Have you ever paid more for a meal than you made in a week?
No.
You're having the best day of your life. What happens next? Another amazing thing or something terrible?
Something amazing, I hope.
Would you rather give up cheese or naps?
Probably cheese.
Are hot dogs sandwiches?
Yes.
No one's looking. Do you put the cart back or leave it in the parking lot?
Do I put the what back?
No one's looking. Do you put the cart back or leave it in the parking lot?
Oh, I put it back.
If you had the power to see the future but couldn't change it, would you use it?
No.
Pineapple on pizza or fist fight?
Pineapple on pizza.
Kill the spider or get an adult?
Get a piece of paper and carry it outside.
Is there a price for you to give up your passion forever?
No.
Kanye.
No.
Which one of your parents settled?
Neither.
Which do you max out first? Intelligence, charisma, or strength?
Intelligence every time.
Did you ever cheat on a test in school?
No.
Tacos or burritos?
Burritos.
Are we alone in the universe?
No.
Would you rather have your inner monologue sound like Gilbert Gottfried or Fran Drescher?
Gilbert Gottfried, definitely, just for the comedic value.
Are Cheez-Its addicting?
Yes, definitely, as evidenced by the fact that I eat way too many.
Morning or night shift?
Morning shift.
Would you rather be 10 minutes late for everything or 20 minutes early for everything?
20 minutes early.
Are you happy with your life right now?
I am.
Make the food or do the dishes?
Do the dishes, because I'm not very good at making the food part.
Are you a squid or a kid?
Squid.
Congratulations, you've survived the
lightning round.
What lightning round question would you like to ask me, and in turn be asked of future guests?
Is the Marvel Cinematic Universe overrated? Dun dun.
I would say yes by Marvel fans, but no by the general populous?
It's a fair
That
answer.
tracks. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think? Is it overrated?
I think it is overrated from the standpoint of like the production quality of some of the things. Like, everything is amazing. Obviously, the production quality is great, but I think that some of the stories are not as compelling as others. Which, I mean, when you have that massive of a universe, it's inevitable that there's going to be a spectrum of great to less than great.
It's just bound to happen. All right, man. Anything you want to plug, recommend, places people can find you or your content?
No, I'm pretty mysterious and elusive in social media, except,
You're on the lam. I got it. We'll keep it hush hush.
Yeah,
We'll use a pseudonym for you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Galan, for being my guest today. And special thanks to my editor, Richard Ashford, and my composer, Joshua Gibbons. And especially thank you, everybody listening at home, or wherever you found the time to appreciate this. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, or just share it with a friend. Every little bit helps. Or, if you already have and are out of episodes to listen to, don't worry. We put out a new episode every Monday at midnight on Soundcloud, YouTube, and now Spotify at Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves podcast. And a very special thank you is due to our very first Patreon patron, Sabella Yellow. Yes, you heard that right. We have a Patreon, and you can be a part of it too. Just head over to patreon.com/Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves podcast. And remember, folks, the sun is sunny, water is runny. So how do you like your eggs, buddy? Have a good one.